Okay, so this section covers the goal sheet. I would always use that in usually the first major session I would have with a client, or certainly soon about there, because what we want to do is, once we've done the wheel of life, we're knowing about the areas that are dissatisfied. But what we want to try and work out is what would actually bring them up to the higher than the 3, the 4, wherever they started from. And that's where we need to start getting the client, and that is you, to sort of future plan and try and think about, well, where is it you want to go? So often a client might think they're really unhappy in an area, but then when we start looking at where they want to go in life, it's not necessarily about getting a better job. It's not necessarily about improving their social life. It might be something much more personal to them. So this is where the goal sheet really helps. So again, I'll share my screen. So this is the goal sheet that I referred to. Again, I haven't covered all the 8 areas that's on the wheel of life, because some of them, I think, when it comes to planning your future, they cross over. So this tool is really important that you do it in reverse. So when you're thinking about defining your goals, that you start at the end, the 10-year plan. So where would you like your career to be in 10 years' time? And it's that 10-year column that really requires all that focus. Well, how do I see my health in 10 years' time? Is it where I am now, or have I run the London Marathon by then? What are my relationships doing? Am I married? Am I divorced? Am I living with somebody? Am I living on my own? Have I improved my relationship with my family? Have I patched up some arguments? It's how you see your ideal future. And the thing is to think about the idea. Where would you love to be, as opposed to moderate it. Really think outside the box and go, do you know what, I'd like to run my own business. Because what we're then doing is we're establishing what your real ambition is and what your real hopes are. So that's quite key. So start with that 10-year column, projecting where you would see yourself ideally in your career, with your health, with relationships, all inclusive, with money, whether you think you need to invest more in yourself, and whether there's something sort of more leisure spiritually that you feel that you should be investing time in. So it might be that you always had an ambition to play the flute and you never have. So sometimes those little extras are quite important for us to get to a sort of even, balanced, content life. And that's the aim. Now this again will take time and a lot of thought. You can elaborate on, the space on the form is quite small, but the idea is you start to project your thoughts onto paper. Then you can work backwards. So as a coach, what I would do is be taking you through, okay, so your career is here currently. In 10 years' time, you would like it to be there. How far back is it before you reach that? So if it's self-employment, what kind of steps will you need to take to get to that 10-year goal? And that's when you start working backwards. So in 5 years, have you achieved that goal? In 5 years, are you doing the training or the preparation to achieve that goal? What do you have to be doing at the 2-year point? What do you have to be doing this year to make that 10-year goal happen? The analogy I often give clients is, climbing Mount Everest. People think, I can't do that. But in actual fact, if it was a goal that you wanted to climb Mount Everest, you could set it as a future goal and do exactly the same thing. So I will have to get into training. I will have to look into funding. I'll have to look into equipment. I need to know whether I can climb at altitude. So there's lots of different things that you could do. And the first goal might be just wall climbing at your local centre. And then you start from wall climbing and then you go on to other things. And then over 1, 2, 3 years, however you incorporate those steps, the Mount Everest climb then becomes much more realistic. And this is no different, whether it's your career, your health, relationships. If you're currently single and you would love to have be married with children in 10 years' time, well, that you can make that happen. It might seem that you can't at this current stage, but because you haven't put those steps in motion. I'm amazed at how many of my clients think things should just happen because they expect that, or they see their friends have just fallen into relationships, or they met somebody at uni or work, and because that hasn't happened to them, they think, well, that will just happen for me too. Again, in reality, is there are things that you can potentially do to make sure it does happen, because the last thing that I would want for any of my clients is to go through life, with their fingers crossed, when there could potentially be things that they could be doing in a positive way to make their lives so much better. And you deserve a good life. So that's really key. So going through this is, again, time consuming, but really thought provoking. What I often find, again, with clients is sometimes there's a clash of what they're trying to achieve. So I had one client who would really like to have been a firefighter. Now, his health, because of his eyesight, prohibited from qualifying. So these are the kind of obstacles that we were addressing. And eventually he decided that he was going to get a loan out. These are these short-term goals. So he could get laser treatment, which would correct the eye problem, which would enable him to apply for the firefighting role. So all good in sequence. But when we were really focused on this goal sheet, what was also really important to him was money, where he was living, his quality of life. And as it transpired, his current role provided him with all of that. So although he didn't love it, his current role gave him the standard of living that he really wanted. And when we discussed the wage for a fireman, the two were not comparable. And he had to then really sit back and think, could he take that standard of living hit to achieve what he thought was his lifelong ambition? So you often get things that don't quite tie in. I've had women who want a really great career, but they also want children. Well, at some point you've got to take some time out to have a child. So sometimes there's a little bit of mismatch, which again is always worth looking at, so you can see how the things marry up. And as it was with my client that wanted to be a firefighter, the end result was he didn't change job. But what we looked at is what elements of being a firefighter that he desired that we could achieve elsewhere. And as it turned out, there were jobs that he could do either as a retained firefighter, or that he could still get that sense of being useful, committed to the service. So, a first aider, a voluntary role, where he could get that bit of kick of not being a hero, but almost, having that sort of reward that you get from helping people without having to give up his job. So it really does require thought. And again, this is something you might want to sit down with a friend and really thrash out. But also bear in mind that sometimes doing it with a friend, they have an emotional investment in you too. So their honesty might not be 100% reliable. So that's just worth noting. So again, once you've got this completed, 10 years, right, where am I in the 5-year plan? What do I need to be doing to achieve that 10-year goal in 2 years? You can look at what the 1-year goal is. And that's your immediate focus. Excuse me. So then you'll get an idea of what you need to be doing now, in essence. So that's the goal sheet. It's a really useful tool to work through. And then what you can do is, once you've got your goal sheet in mind, and again, this is an organic document. Whatever you put down there isn't set in stone. You're not committing yourself to anything. There's no contract. It's just you putting down your thoughts and ideas of where you would like to go, and also how you're going to potentially improve your life to achieve those goals. And as I said, so once you've got an idea of what you need to be instantly doing, so, excuse me, if it's changing job, then obviously you can be looking at updating your CV, for example. And that is where your action plan comes in. So then you start focusing on your goals and putting them down on paper. So you'll now need to go and have a look at the action plan segment, so to see how you can best do that. Okay.